This is on forecasting and production planning. The forecasting is the biggest part, and we're going to use the Excel spreadsheet mostly. I'm going to go through some slides first to give you an overview, and after that we're going to look at the Excel spreadsheet. So if you have a laptop, it would be good to open it and download this Excel spreadsheet from Canvas, and that'll help you to follow along. Okay, this was developed by Dr. Lai. We've been using this spreadsheet for quite a few years. It's a little bit complex, but it works really well if you get used to using it. There's also some tools on the game website. We find they're not as good as this one, so we'd encourage you to try using this one. So there's a few places where you're going to get your data from the game website. There's 3 or 4 different reports, and you're going to look at the historical data worksheet, the sales forecast worksheet, shipment orders, and production schedule worksheet. Down here is a website for link for Dr. Lai's website. That's also on Canvas. You can link to it from there. And he has copies of the notes and some other information, so it's worth looking at to see what he's got for you there. So this is actually the old version of the game input sheet, but the basic inputs are the same. You have to start making decisions in the game very soon. One of the first things you have to do is decide how many hours you're going to work on each line, and that will translate into how many parts are produced for your factories. The way that you determine how many parts you need is you have to do a forecast. And so what I'm going to show you tonight is how to do the forecast and how to translate that into a production plan. So here's the 3 most common reports. They're described in the manual for the game, and you can go online and download these reports to see what information you have in them. All the teams start with the same information, the same history for the first 2 years. So you start on an even level, and then you start making your decisions from there, and some teams perform better than other teams based on how good they make decisions, how good they forecast, and of course on some luck. So there are seasonal indices in the data. If you look at this, in winter, you sell 92% of the average. So winter is a slower season, and in fall it's 116%. So fall is a busier season. So you would expect that your fall sales would be higher than average and your winter sales would be lower than average. These factors are actually built right into the Excel spreadsheet, so you don't have to worry about this too much. Okay, when you do your forecasting, there are a lot of variables that can influence your forecast, and we're going to focus on 3 for the game. So you're going to look at real GDP. What's GDP stand for? Gross domestic product. You're going to look at average price and time, or the history of your sales. So GDP, that's an indication of your customers' desire and ability to buy something. If you have a low GDP, that means your customers have a low desire or they have a low ability to buy your product. And if there's a high GDP, then they have a good ability to buy it. They're enthusiastic about buying. So your sales should be positively correlated to GDP. As GDP goes up, you would expect your sales to go up. As GDP goes down, you would expect your sales to go down. Now the second one that we look at is price. So as your price goes up, what's going to happen to your sales? They should go down normally. So if you charge more and more for your product, your customers are going to look for other options. So that means that price should be negatively correlated with your forecast. And these are important, whether it's positively or negatively correlated with your future forecast. It's going to come into play when we do the regression analysis. And the third one is time. So if you've been increasing in sales over time, you would expect your sales to continue increasing, Or if your sales have been decreasing over time, you would expect them to decrease. So your future sales should be positively correlated with time. And we're going to see those factors when we get into the spreadsheet and regression. When we do the regression, there's a few different models that we're going to look at, and we're going to see which model works the best. And by model, I mean a regression analysis. The first one we look at is just GDP and price. So we ignore time. The second one we look at is just time, and we ignore the other factors. The third is time and GDP, and the fourth is all three of them. So what we're doing is we're running 4 different models with regression, and we're looking at these different combinations to see which of those combinations give us the best prediction of what the future sales are going to be. I'll go over that more when I get into the Excel spreadsheet. Okay, this is the forecasting spreadsheet. And you notice along the bottom there's 5 or 6 different tabs. You have to use all of these tabs. First one is historical data. And right now the spreadsheet is populated with some reasonable numbers, but they're not the real numbers from the game. We put it in so that the spreadsheet works when you first open it, but these are the wrong numbers. They're close. So you're going to have to go to your reports and download this data. And you need to update your GDP and your consumer price index. You also have to tell the spreadsheet how many companies are in your world. So for my class, there's 5 companies. And for the other classes, I don't know how many, there's either 5 or 6. So you have to update that for your own particular class. My class, there's 5, and that's updated here. Now on these spreadsheets, on these pages, the yellow is what you're responsible for. The things in white and in other colors, you don't have to change, and in fact, you shouldn't change. Now this spreadsheet is a little bit delicate. There are ways to corrupt it, and if you corrupt it, you're going to get bad information. So I suggest that you treat it carefully, and each time you go to make a decision, you should save a new version of your spreadsheet. And if you think you're having problems, then go back to the original spreadsheet, put your information in again, and see if you can clean it up. Because it does happen where the spreadsheet gets corrupted, and it's very hard to figure out why it's corrupted or where it's corrupted, so you're better off be careful with it. And if you think there's a problem with it, go back to an original version and repopulate it. It doesn't take a lot of work to repopulate it. There's not much information you enter in. Okay, so the historical data tab, you have to update that one time. And once you update that, you don't have to change that sheet again. Again, everything in yellow is your responsibility. So here it's asking for industry average price. And right now, for the first 2 years, all of the teams have a $10 per unit price. So that's going to be correct. So go through and update that, and that's a first step. You don't have to do it again unless you corrupt your spreadsheet. The next tab is FCT M1. So that's forecast for region M1. Remember that each world has 3 local regions, M1, M2, and M3, or America 1, America 2, America 3. And there's a foreign region. And on this spreadsheet, it just calls it M4. So you have to forecast for each region. And then it sums them all together in the production planning part of the spreadsheet. So notice on the bottom here, there's M1, M2, M3, and M4. And they all look the same. They all work the same. So make sure that each time you make a decision, you have to update each one of those 4, or you're going to get bad information. So let's take a look at what we have here. At the top, we've got our industry sales. And it gets that information from the historical data tab that you've already entered. So it's looking at that other sheet and it's pulling the information in for you. And it's populating the first 8 quarters. Here's year 1 and year 2, quarters 1 through 4 for those 2 years. So that's your history, your first 2 years of history. You've got industry sales, and notice that there's a lot of helper flags in this spreadsheet. So for almost everything that you need to do in this spreadsheet, there's built-in help. And you can thank Dr. Lay for all his hard work to put all that in for you. It really makes it easy to use this sheet. It's kind of complex, but it makes it easy to figure out what's going on just by reading the help flags. So here we've got industry sales, SA sales. That stands for seasonally adjusted sales. So the spreadsheet is taking the total sales and it's adjusting them based on the seasonal factors. The next column is time, and those are just the 8 quarters of data that you have so far, and that'll continue to update as you run the game. The next one is real GDP, and the last one is average price. So we've got all the data in there to run those 4 models to see which regression model gives us the best results. Okay, now we have to take a little break from this spreadsheet because you have to prepare your computer to do regression. So regression analysis, it's an add-on to Excel. It's a free add-on, but you have to install it the first time you use it. Now there's a tutorial on Dr. Lai's website for how to do it, and it's a very good step-by-step. I'm going to show you real quick how to do it, but if you don't follow what I'm doing, just go to his tutorial and follow through that. So you go to File, Options at the bottom, Add-ins, and should be set to Excel add-ins at the bottom. Hit Go. And what you want is the Analysis Tool Pack. So select that and hit OK. And that's all there is to it, to put this add-in into your version of Excel. You only have to do it one time. Once you do that, it's there until you restart your computer or buy a new computer. So the way to tell if you have it, if we go over to Data, oops, I don't know what that is. Go to Data, and over on the right-hand side here is Data Analysis. So if that doesn't appear, that means you don't have that add-in installed properly. If you can't find it under Data, you have to go back and do that. Okay, so Data Analysis. And there's a whole bunch of different tools. We don't care about any of them except for regression. So we select regression. Now this is going to take some practice to get used to these steps. And right now it looks a little bit cumbersome. But once you get used to it, you'll be able to do this very quickly. And you're going to be doing this. There's 4 regions and 4 models, so that's 16 times you're going to run it, and you're going to do that twice a week for the rest of the semester. So you're going to get really good at doing this. There's also a tutorial on Dr. Lai's website for how to work through this whole spreadsheet. So there's a PDF note sheet that tells you every single step that you need to do. So if you miss something, go back and look at the video, read through Dr. Lai's tip sheet, or come and see one of us during office hours. We'll help you through it. But let me run through it. So the first thing it wants is the Y value. And notice on the spreadsheet, he's already written Y at the top, so you remember which are the Ys. So my Y range, I'm going to select SA sales, and I'm going to select that historical data. Notice that I clicked on SA sales because I want titles in my results. And I need to tell it that we have labels. So I need to click on labels there so that it knows that the first one is a label. Now I'm going to do an X range. So I'm going to select time and real GDP. I've got labels selected. Now I need an output range. I don't want it on a different sheet. I want it on this sheet. And you have to make sure you get this output range in the correct spot. So if you look at the regression analysis output that's already here, that's where you want it to go. You want it to overwrite. So for output range, I want it right there. And that should be good to run. Now I'm going to hit OK. It gives me a warning that I'm going to overwrite some data. I don't care about that. And so what it's done is I've run a regression analysis. So just a few clicks. I tell it what I want to predict. I tell it what my X inputs are for making my prediction. And it gives me this big result with a lot of numbers. So we don't have to worry about a lot of this information that it gives us. But what we have to look at is the positive and negative sign down here on the intercepts. So I've got time and I've got real GDP. This is saying that time is positively correlated because it has a positive symbol. And it's saying that real GDP is positively correlated. So this is really important because sometimes the regression will build an invalid model. So you might get a result that looks good, but the signs are wrong, so it's giving you invalid information. So the first step to running regression analysis is you have to decide, is it a valid model? And you do that just by looking at the signs on these coefficients. So I've got a valid model. Now the second thing I have to look at is the R-squared value. And up here I've got an R-squared value of, I guess, 69%. So what that's telling me essentially is that this model that I've built with regression gives me a good result 69% of the time. Or you might say it's 69% accurate. So not bad, not great, but not too bad. So I'm going to try a different model now. Remember that 69%. I'll go back to data analysis, regression. It still has my Y input range. Now I want to change my X's. I'm going to try with all three. It has my output location, it has labels, so it's good to go. So I'm going to run that. Now, what's it telling me? The first thing I want to look at is, do I have a valid model? So it's saying that time is negatively correlated, GDP is positively, and price is negatively. So is it a valid model? No, because time has to be positive. If I go up to R-squared here, I've got 82% or 83%. So it looks like I have a better model, but it's not a valid model because my signs are incorrect here. So check to make sure you have a valid model. And if you do, then you pick the best of your valid models. So that one's not valid. We'll run another one. I'll do GDP and price. Okay, GDP is positively correlated and price is negatively correlated. So that's a valid model. As price goes down, sales should go down. Did I say that right? Yeah, as price goes down, sales should go up. So it should be negatively correlated. What's my R-squared value on this? 82%. So this is a better model than the first one that I ran. And the third model that I can do is just time. So I'll do regression with time. Okay, so this model, just using time, I've got a valid model because I've got a positive sign, but my R squared is only 66%. So it's a valid model, but it's not as good a model. So now what I want to do is I want to leave the best model displayed on my results. So I have to go back and rerun that previous one, which was GDP and price, wasn't it? Okay, so I have a valid model. It's the best of the four. All I need to do now is just leave those numbers where they are. And this spreadsheet will look at those numbers and use them in the forecast. So I don't need to do any more analysis with regression. I don't need to do any interpretation with the standard errors and the t-stat and p-value. I can ignore all that stuff. So don't get worried about what's all this information, what do I do with it. We're not going to get that deep into regression. We're just using it as a tool to do our forecasting. Okay, so I'm done that step. Now I have to do some housekeeping. Down here I see more yellow. So on the left there, you can see that it's saying that the next quarter I'm going to forecast is year 3, quarter 1. So that's correct for the first time you run this. It's going to forecast year 3, quarter 1. The next time you run it, it's going to, you want to forecast year 3, quarter 2. So you have to update that each time you make a decision. The other thing you have to do, notice there's yellow here. So this yellow is asking for the results for year 3, quarter 1. Where do you get that? Total sales for year 3, quarter 1. Where would you find that? No, it doesn't exist yet, right? We haven't done year 3, quarter 1. So when you do your first decision, you're going to put in your decision points. They're going to run the game, and then you'll get the results back, including your results for year 3, quarter 1. So when you want to forecast year 3, quarter 2, first thing you have to do is put in your results from quarter 1 so that the spreadsheet knows what you did. This spreadsheet, keep in mind, is not linked to the game somehow. You have to keep updating it. So you have to update your yellow for your sales, GDP, and average price. You have to update all that information. Now keep in mind that you want to keep this information within your team and not share it with the other teams, because they can see the results of what you've done in the game, but they don't necessarily know why you're making those decisions. So you want to keep it kind of secret from the other teams. Okay, let's go down here. Here it's yellow and it's asking for real GDP. So I need real GDP for year 3, quarter 1, 2, 3, 4. And I don't remember what that is or where to get it. So if I just put my mouse over that box, it tells me, it's really hard to read, must update this every quarter, forecast values from report F1. So it tells you where to go to find that information. You just have to go find it and update the spreadsheet to run it. Down here it's asking for your company sales. So at the top you are putting in the total industry sales and you're forecasting the whole industry, and then you're deciding based on that forecast how much is my company going to get. So you're not forecasting your own company, you're forecasting the whole industry. And then you're saying, okay, based on the whole industry, what's my team's market share going to be? So right now, each team, if there's 5 teams in the world, each team has 20% market share. In the future, your market share is going to go up or going to go down, so you have to adjust your own market share. There's 2 things you do for that. You tell the spreadsheet past information and future information. So for the past information, you have to tell it how much you sold. So you already told it the industry sold this amount. Now you have to tell it our company sold this portion. So this first one, company sales and market area, and it tells you where to find that, and you put in what your company sales were, this yellow one. And then the next yellow one, you have to tell the spreadsheet, is your market share going up or it's going down, or it's going to be stable. So for the first decision, your market share is probably going to be the same, because you don't really have any information to know if your market share is going to go up or going to go down. So I've got a pull-down menu here, and you can set it anywhere from increasing 5% to decreasing 5%. So to start, I'm going to say, okay, it's 0. We're not going to go up in market share. We're not going to go down. Let's just keep it nice and even. That's our prediction as far as how our market share is going to change. Okay, now if I look at this sheet, I've done everything in yellow, so I don't have to do anything else as far as data entry on this sheet. It tells you a lot of information. There's some hot links on this that help you navigate between sheets, but you don't want to change any of this other information. It's all information, or it's being used in calculations in the spreadsheet. So like I said, be careful with these spreadsheets because you can corrupt them, and if you change a value in here you don't know what that value is being used for, then you're going to get into trouble with it. Okay, that's M1. So I have to do the exact same thing in M2, 3, and 4. I have to put in the past quarter's information if I have new information. Right now you don't have any historical information for year 3, so there's no update in these yellows. And then I run the 4 models to see which one is the best. What was that? I thought someone was saying, that's wrong. No, it's right. Okay, so you have to run the 4 regression models for each of the 4 regions, and you have to do that every time you make a decision, because it's not necessarily going to stay the same from quarter to quarter. One model might work better this time, and a different model might work better the next time. So each time you do it, you have to run all these regression models. And you get pretty quick with it. Just don't be careless with it, because you can get bad information if you don't run them correctly. If you run the regression and you leave an invalid model as your result, it's going to say, okay, I'm good, I'm using that information. So it's not going to pop up and flag and say, hey, you didn't pick the best model, you picked an invalid model. That's up to you guys to do that analysis and make sure that you pick a valid model and pick the best model. So forecast is positively correlated with GDP. As GDP goes up, your sales should go up. Positively with price, and positively with time, and negatively correlated with price. So if you put your price up, you should expect your sales to go down. If you put your price down, you should expect them to go up. But if you put your price up and down every quarter, then your customers get unhappy and you can lose sales just because you're going up and down. So just putting your price down doesn't necessarily increase your sales. It could scare off your customers. Okay, so that's that part. Any questions so far? No? Do you understand? I see some blank stares and some nods, and hopefully the people in the other classes understand.
This is getting posted, right?
The video will be posted, the spreadsheet is posted. There's a PDF that's also posted that tells you every step to go through. So you can, even without seeing this lecture, you could open the PDF and the spreadsheet and just follow exactly what it says on the instructions, and you'd be able to do it. Or even without that, you could just open the spreadsheet and read all the little notes that are in it, and you would be able to use it. So it's kind of a complex spreadsheet, but all the help information is there to help you work through it. And of course, you can come and see your professor or come and see me if I'm not your professor, and we'll help you through it. Okay. So on this sheet, at the bottom it says forecast summary. So these are the results. Let me just show a little more. So at the top it says company forecast sales in units, and at the bottom it says industry sales forecast in units. So it's giving you two bits of information that you've produced from your forecasting regression analysis. It's saying how much the whole industry is expected to sell and how much your specific company is expected to sell. So let's have a look at what we've got here. We'll just look at company sales. Here we've got year 3, quarter 1, and then across the top we've got M1, M2, M3, M4. So you've got a forecast for each of your regions for year 3, quarter 1. It's also showing year 3, quarter 2, 3, 4, and year 4 even. So when you make your game decisions, you have to look short term at some things, but you also have to be looking long term. For example, if you want to build a factory, it takes 2 or 3 quarters to get that done. If you want to add lines, it takes 2 or 3 quarters. So you can't change capacity quickly. It takes a period of time to change your capacity. And you need to know when you're going to need that capacity. There's no sense in building another factory and filling it full of lines and creating a lot of production capacity if you don't have the sales to support that production. So if you overbuild your factories, your costs are going to go up. If you run your lines, your inventory is going to go up, and that brings your cost up, and it's just not a good situation. On the other hand, if you don't build your lines and your factories in time, then you run out of production capacity, and you start stocking out, and you start losing customers because you have stockouts, and also a lot of bad things happen in the game. So you have to really balance your future production based on what your forecast is. If you do a poor job of forecasting, you're going to have bad information for planning your future production. So this part is really important, and you have to learn how to do this very quickly because the first decisions are when? Next week? So next week you have to be in a position where you can make your decision on what you're going to do for your production. So a lot of work to do to get up to speed on this. So this table is just a summary report. And notice it starts with year 3, quarter 1. If I go back to this part and I change this to year 3, quarter 2, then that updates and I go to my summary. Now my summary report is starting with year 3, quarter 2, and it's giving me information through year 5, quarter 1. And it's giving me errors because I don't have all the information updated for year 3, quarter 1. So it's looking for that historical information and it's not finding it. So you have to be really meticulous with this spreadsheet, that you update all the information, don't corrupt anything, and it'll give you good results. If you don't update things, you're going to get things like these errors, and that's bad information for your forecast. Okay, so that's my forecasted production, or my forecasted sales for the next 2 years, 8 quarters. That's what I think I'm going to sell. There's some variables in this because, for one, your forecast is not 100% accurate. No forecast ever is. Your factories are not 100% efficient. Just because you decide that you're going to work a certain amount of hours in your factory doesn't mean it's going to produce the exact expected results. They might overperform and they might underperform what you expect. So you're going to try to get the output that you plan from your production lines. There's going to be some variation in that. You're going to try to predict how much you're going to sell in each region, but there's going to be variation in that. So you have to be careful that you're adding enough buffer to your production plans to cover the inconsistencies or the inaccuracies, both in the production output and in the forecasting. So let's look at the next table. And I'll get to that. I'll come back to that last thought more in this table. So this table, or this sheet, is called Shipment Orders. And we've only got a little bit of yellow on here, so there's only a few things to worry about. The first one is location of the home plant. So you have to tell the spreadsheet where your home plant is. Team 1s are in M1, Team 2s are in M3, Team 4 is in M1. So you have to tell this where your plant is located. The second thing you have to do is you have to tell the spreadsheet how much extra inventory you want to carry. So you know there's inaccuracies and inconsistencies and errors in your forecast and your production output. So you know how much you predict you're going to sell, and you know that that's not going to be exactly accurate. So how much safety stock are you going to carry? If you have too much inventory, your costs are going to go up from carrying inventory, and at some points your inventory is going to become obsolete and you lose money on it. If you don't have enough inventory, then you stock out. If you stock out, you lose sales, you lose customers because they get unhappy that you're stocking out and they go to a different supplier. Your investors will get unhappy because you're not making your sales that you should be making. So a lot of negative things can happen if you stock out. So too much inventory, your costs go up. Not enough inventory, you lose your sales, you lose your reputation, and you lose your customers. And even your salespeople might quit. So a lot of negative things can happen if you don't run your business properly. Okay, so how do we do that? In the yellow, it says inventory carryovers from last quarter. So you have to tell the spreadsheet how much remaining inventory you had from the last quarter. The spreadsheet doesn't know the results from the game. You have to tell it each time. So you're going to tell it that in M1 we had this much leftover inventory. So in this example, we've got 58,000 units in M1. M2 has 21,000, and M4 only has 9,000. So 9's maybe a little bit low. And it's got some helpers on here. It says to enter your data on inventory and your desired inventory ratios. So you tell it how much leftover inventory you had, and you tell it what ratio of excess inventory you want. Right now they're all set to 25%. So how are you going to decide what percent of extra inventory you want?
Go off the standard.
Well, there's a few ways to do it. It's set at 25%. That's probably a reasonable setting. Also, there's some information in here that tells you how to make those decisions. So there's a lot of information on here that you need to go through. And here it's saying that a ratio of 25 to 45 is kind of a good range. So follow the information that he's given you on the spreadsheet to use as a guide. And then as the quarters go by, you're going to get a feel for whether you need more inventory or less inventory and how you should adjust it. So start with the suggestions and then adjust it from there. Where's my slider? So on the right-hand side, it's giving you some more information. Notice that there's no yellow here. So you don't have to worry about entering information. Now, a good way to handle this spreadsheet, because it's big and it's complex and there's a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, to start with, just focus on the yellow inputs and read what it's telling you about the information, but don't get too worried about interpreting that information. So start with, do the inputs and look at the end results and kind of go on a bit of a leap of faith that that's a good way to start. And then the more you can get to understand what's going on in this, the more accurate you might be able to get your forecasts. But don't get too caught in the complexity of this spreadsheet. Start simple, focus on the yellow inputs, and read the instruction flags, and don't corrupt the spreadsheet. That's probably the biggest problem that people have. They corrupt the spreadsheet, and you can't always tell that it's corrupted, but it's giving you weird information. So one thing you might do is have two different people running the spreadsheet, keep them separate, put in the inputs, and check to see that you're getting the same results. If you're not getting the same results, then somebody has a corrupted spreadsheet. Okay, and the last that we're going to go over, and this is actually part of the second half of the lecture, but I'm going to give you a bit of a primer on it because I went a little bit fast on this. This is telling you a whole bunch of information, but again, you don't want to get overwhelmed with what's going on. So first, let's look at the yellow, and let's look at what this is asking us. So here it's got year 3, quarter 1. So here's the 8 quarters down the left-hand side. So that's pretty good. And then home plant and overseas plant. So you can have 2 factories. You start with one factory in your home region, and then you have an option of building another factory in the overseas region. So right now, you have one factory with 6 lines. So at the top, it's saying home plant active, you've got 6. You don't have anyone laid off. Hopefully no one's going to lay anyone off for the first quarter. And you don't have a foreign factory. Nobody has a foreign factory. It takes a few quarters to build it, so there's no way anyone could have a foreign factory. So I've got 6 lines. I've got no one laid off. I've got no foreign factory, so that's all I've got is those 6 lines. And I can work my lines 40 hours a week and up to 48 hours a week. So I can't work 52 hours a week. That's not allowed. And I can't work 35 hours a week. That's also not allowed. You have to have your lines working full time, and you're allowed to work them up to 8 hours of overtime. So that's the only tweaking you can do in your game right now. You can increase your overtime or keep it where it is. Now it's given another information. If I click on this click on the 40 and go to that drop down, I've got an option of changing it to more hours per week. So when you start the game, that's really all you can do is you can decide, okay, am I going to work regular 40 hours a week or I'm going to work 48 hours a week? You can decide for the future, maybe you're going to open more lines, you're going to train for second shift. You can do a lot of things in future quarters, but in the first quarter, you can't do any of those things because they all take time. Okay, so that's all this left-hand side is doing. It's giving you options to say how much your production is working. And if I build a factory, say in year 4, then I can put into this spreadsheet that in year 4, I've got a factory coming on and it's going to produce this much production. Okay, so that's all I want to go over so far as forecasting. And we're going to take a break and we're going to reconvene in biology. I think it's 144. It shows on Canvas, right?
Yes.
Pretty sure it's 144. So thank you for everyone in the other rooms. I hope you were able to hear the lecture. See you in 144. Thanks.